Okay, you're on.
What would you like to know, Matt?
Yeah, why don't you give everybody a little bit of a background, first?
Yeah. Well, let's see. So, born in Berkeley, California. Grew up in the Bay Area. Was a huge sports fan. Didn't know anything about sports business, but was an athlete and fan, like many of us. Was fortunate enough to get into the University of Arizona. Had some friends that preceded me there, and so had some great feedback about what a great and fun school it was, and was excited about the chance to get out of Dodge and leave the state. Thought it would be real fun to do that, and it lived up to it and more. Didn't rush the first semester. For some reason, my parents thought it'd be better for me to get into school. Quickly learned that if you're not part of the Greek system, social life can be quite limited. And so rushed the second semester while I was there. I was in 89, right? Or no, 88, because we graduated in 87 from high school. And so 88 pledge class, probably like many of you, was interested in a handful of fraternities, felt a heart at SIG that didn't quite feel at the other fraternities, and so was fortunate enough to pledge there, met and have had many lifelong friends from there. You guys, I'm sure, completely understand that. Two of which are on here, Andy and Brian, long time incredible friends. Just had a wonderful experience at U of A. Was a journalism major because I like to write and wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do, and turned out to be valuable. There's an industry or a role that you don't write, particularly with the evolution of communication, email and text and so forth. To be good at writing is very valuable. It's certainly not the most important thing, but it's a detriment if you aren't good at communicating written. So that was a good call for me. I would say in regards to the fraternity, tons of relationships that have borne fruit in business, but probably most important thing from the SIGEP experience for me was these wonderful friendships. That's an easy one, and I think everybody would expect to hear that. But I would say the second most important thing is just social skills. You really, the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. And so you rub up against, people who are, have certain goals and discipline and intellect and perspective that they can share with you and teach you. And so you learn so much from being alongside all these people. And so I think, the ability to get comfortable in your own skin is something that the fraternity was really important for me, and has carried over the social skills of it into business. You hear people talk about the business is about relationships, and it's about a lot of things, but it's hard to argue that relationships and not just having them, but the ability to maintain them, and the ability to know how and when to leverage them in business. Not to sound cheap, but that's the reality in business, is that you're some of those relationships bear fruit in business. And so SIGEP was immeasurably important for me. I think back, if I hadn't had that experience, I think I would be at a very different place personally and consequently professionally. So indebted to University of Arizona and to the Greek system and to SIGEP. So that's that. Left, graduated in '92 after the 5-year plan. Had a little too much fun at certain junctures, and like most people, didn't know what I was going to do. Had no idea. My parents gifted me with a couple other people who Brian and Andy know, Brett Robinson and Chris Benton, attendance at a sports careers conference. It was in San Diego, and met different people, but one in particular I met, who's a really, really successful business person in Phoenix and has a lot of clients around the world, many of which you would be aware of, kind of sort of the Charles Barkleys and people like that. And so I met him, and one day he and developed a relationship with he and his family, actually, really nice people. His daughter went to Arizona, and he said to me one day over lunch, he said, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? And I said, I would probably intern at an NBA team. At the time, it was, the trajectory of the NBA was like this with Jordan and the Bulls. We're seeing that right now in The Last Dance. And I was in LA. I was back in California. I was working, I think, 2 or 3 restaurant jobs. And this guy, after telling him that I was interested in interning at an NBA team, picked up a phone, called the president of the LA Clippers, who actually were better than the Lakers at the time. They had a few guys like Danny Manning. I don't know if you remember any of those guys, but they had a really good team. Mark Jackson, Larry Brown was their coach. And he set up an interview for me. Went in, got an internship, was working for free, working a couple restaurant gigs in LA. Was, behind the scenes with an NBA team, which was very exciting. And eventually they brought me on full time in their sponsorship group. And that was kind of my first lesson in relationships and making sure that you're capitalizing on every interaction that you have. So the opportunity to work for free for an NBA team and then develop relationships within the company. Most hires come from within. They hire people that they've trained and that they like. And so was fortunate enough to be standing there, having been equipped by them and knowing them, and they trusted me. And so got hired, first job, full-time job. Was able to finally quit the restaurant jobs and worked there for a couple years. And then sort of lesson number 2 came when my job at the Clippers was to manage all the sponsor relationships and execute against their agreements with the Clippers. So they had, a Budweiser, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, some big brands were sponsors of the team. And there were certain things that were in their agreement with the Clippers that was my responsibility to execute, which is, signage in the arena. They had some commercial spots on the broadcast. That was pre-digital. Nowadays, there's a lot of digital activation, some in-arena promotions during the game, half-court shot for $1 million, that kind of stuff. All the different ways that they leverage their relationship with the Clippers. And so they had a relationship, or so there was a sponsorship with a subsidiary of Nike called Sports Specialties. And I managed that relationship. And through that relationship, they asked me if I would consider coming to work for them. So felt like an exciting opportunity. It was down in Orange County here in LA, and joined this subsidiary of Nike. I was one of about 6 or 7 different people hired by Nike to help build Nike's foray into the licensed merchandise business. So prior to that, it was difficult to buy shorts with the Clippers logo on it. In fact, I had some shorts and sweatshirts and stuff just because I worked for the team and I knew the equipment manager when I was working for the Clippers. And so, people would, but for being 5'11", people wondered where I got the gear from. And so I was one of a group of people tasked for Nike with helping to bring that business to market for Nike. And it was a really, really fun job where I, at 26 years old, I was traveling the country by myself, working with some of the iconic Nike athletes at the time: Brett Favre, Charles Barkley, Dennis Rodman, David Robinson, Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, a whole bunch of Marshall Faulk, a whole bunch of future Hall of Famers. And because we had them under contract, so we would go around and do photo shoots with them and use those materials for point of sale materials at retail to try to sell this Nike licensed merchandise at Big Five. And so that was part of what I did. I built some sponsorship programs at NBA teams. I worked with equipment managers throughout the NBA, hockey, and the NFL to get the merchandise on field, like on the sidelines, particularly hats, stuff like that became part of the way that these companies merchandise their product on TV and on athletes. And so worked with the teams to do that. Spent a lot of time in NFL, NBA, hockey locker rooms, which was really fun and exciting and eye-opening and educational. From there, because I was working with the league offices, NFL, NBA, hockey in particular, a little bit of baseball, but mostly those, was in New York meeting with the NBA, and they turned the tables on me and said, how would you like to come work for the NBA? And so, through a kind of a series of events, ended up moving to New York to work for the NBA league office. I was there all of 6 months, and I was proposing a program to launch an entertainment marketing division at the NBA, just because I was from LA and I'd done some of it. It was in its infancy, entertainment marketing. It was born out of things like kind of the well-known story in the industry is a 21-year-old no-name actor wore a pair of Ray-Ban wafer sunglasses in a low-budget film called Risky Business, and ended up taking their sales from something like $18 million a year to $500 million a year for a line of sunglasses that were actually about to be discontinued. So it's kind of the launch of entertainment marketing. But so I proposed for the NBA that we should start this division, and spent 6 months, 3 of which I was living in a hotel. David Stern, the former NBA commissioner, the late former NBA commissioner, Adam Silver, the current NBA commissioner, and Rick Welts, the current president of the Golden State Warriors, signed off on it. I had to pitch those guys, signed off on it real quickly. To their credit, they're all visionary guys in sports and business. Sent me back out to LA, put my stuff back on a truck and sent me back out to LA. Lived in an apartment. They put me up in an 3-bedroom apartment, and I was working out of that for almost a year. Was in the beach shows back then, pre 9/11, pre-COVID, and a lot of other things. We had a broadcast relationship with NBC, the NBA did, so I leveraged that relationship to get into Let me know if you guys can still hear me. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Are you guys, can you hear me still?
You're good now.
So maybe 2 weeks on the ground in LA, I had a bunch of relationships with wardrobers, costumers at shows. And so NBC, through that relationship, had put me in touch with a bunch of their shows, costumers, as it were. It was it was during the Friends, Seinfeld, Frasier, ER run when NBC was on top in primetime programming. And so I knew all those people. I would go over to Warner Brothers where they all shoot, and I would just have, because I was with the NBA, I would have carte blanche to walk from set to set to set. All the stars, all the producers, not all of them, some of them knew me just because I was the NBA guy, which was, everybody wanted to sit courtside at Lakers games. And so I was kind of the candy man. And so I get a call about 2 weeks in from the costumer, who's, I think, an Academy Award winner now. And she said, hey, if you can run a Knicks sweatshirt over to me. So a lot of this was just kind of speculative for me. Was sure I could do something, but not sure how much in this space. And she said, if you can run a Knicks sweatshirt over today, I might have an opportunity for you. So I drove across town. If you know LA, it's not easy. It was rush hour, and I had to get onto the Warner Brothers lot and on and on. It probably took me 2.5 hours door to door. And showed up with a Knicks sweatshirt. So 3 weeks later, which is the cycle of shooting a show to airing it, there's this episode where Ross and Rachel characters, Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston, they get in an argument. They're supposed to go out to a black tie event. They get in an argument over something. It's been a while, so I don't remember exact storyline, but they get in an argument, and so they're supposed to get dressed for this affair, and she refuses to, and she comes out of her room in her pajama bottoms and a Knicks sweatshirt. And so of a 22-minute, half-hour show, it's probably like 17 minutes. She was sitting there arguing with him and then laying on the couch and kind of exaggerating her unwillingness to go, but she had on this Knicks sweatshirt. And it was kind of the launch of the thing, and at the time, they were getting 30 million viewers for the show. And it cost us nothing, the cost of a sweatshirt. And so it was sort of the beginning of entertainment marketing for us. Ended up blossoming into developing shows and other forms of entertainment partnerships with studios and so forth. But once again, the lesson was, jumped from, it was a relationship that brought me to the Clippers. It was a relationship that brought me to Nike. It was a relationship that brought me to the NBA. It was a relationship that brought me that opportunity with Friends and kind of kicked that thing off. I'll speed it up here a little bit. After that, 9 years at the NBA, jumped out, partnered in a startup record company. We got signed to Interscope Geffen Records, major label Interscope. Was relatively short-lived. Won't bore you with the details, but was an exciting opportunity in the business. We launched our first band that was charting on both Billboard sales and radio charts for about 16 weeks, which is a big deal. Touring, then an MTV show ultimately. The long and the short of it is our investor was in oil in the Gulf, got hit by Hurricane Katrina. His production, our funding came to a halt after about a year and a half. And so was a time for me to move on, opportunity for me to move on. Jumped out, spent a couple years consulting. And then once again, through relationships, had a conversation with somebody that I knew at NASCAR. And they said that the head of the LA office role is open. Got into the interview process and was hired. Spent 8.5 years there managing their LA office entertainment marketing group, their events group, their content strategy, and their youth marketing. So had a broader footprint than I had at the NBA. Was a great experience. Year and a half ago, jumped out. Whose time had spent, you know, you as I'm sure everybody on here can relate, spent some time, kind of after a while was doing the same things and didn't allow for, as in a regional office, which is one of the downsides, is sometimes it's hard to grow beyond what you are. And so had probably stayed there a couple years, even too long. And so jumped out and have been consulting the last year and a half, have with, in particular right now, with a gaming or gamification app business, and then a biotech company that's super cool. So always looking ahead at kind of what's coming and where I want to be, which is increasingly more important now, to be thinking about where business is going, not just the trends pre-COVID, but now that COVID happened, it's really changed the paradigm of what's next. It's accelerated cord cutting. It's accelerated the need for every business to think about who are they in the digital era. Nobody wants us to have, to sort of be caught with their pants down again. I mean, everybody has. Some people are naturally well positioned, like, esports and gaming, that are consumed largely online. But every single business has to be thinking about how they're gonna, what is their iteration in the short and midterm. Like, what are they going to do right now? Because nobody knows exactly how long this is going to be restricted. But also, it's kind of alerted everybody that we need to be a business that's prepared for the possibility of this happening again, or second waves, and so on and so forth. So that's my career in a nutshell.
Hey, Zane, you got a couple young undergrads on. What advice would you give for any undergraduates looking for employment in the sports industry right now, sports and entertainment?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. One is, in business in general, data and analytics. So data analytics are the hottest thing going. Every business is in need of leveraging data, research, data, analytics, measurement, insights, to optimize their ability to target. The more you can figure out who exactly will consume your product. And so that's sports, that's consumer products. It's every business moving into data and analytics. And so having being conversant in that at the very least. There's whole careers in it. Talked to a friend yesterday who's one of the leaders at NASCAR in analytics and insights group. So now the teams, it's a really smart way into sports, is data and analytics. And I'm not talking about on the baseball side where you're, on the baseball operations or football operations side where you're analyzing data on the performance of athletes. I'm talking about analyzing data to understand who the consumer is and how to reach them. I'd say that's the first thing. It's just an incredibly kind of future thinking to get into sports. Even if you're in marketing, you need to have a conversive. It's part of marketing, but they have their own groups at a lot of these companies. And so the more versed you are in that, the better. And then the other things that are super hot, esports, gaming, the gamification of everything, is something that's important to think about. So those are things that I raise, not necessarily because they're going to help you in your search, but that they're super hot. And they're not going anywhere. gaming is ridiculously huge. I got a buddy who works for Twitch. I'm sure you guys know. I don't get it personally, but it doesn't matter that I don't get it. You know, hundreds of millions of viewers watching people play video games is here to stay, and it's also, you know, it's pandemic proof. So those are areas that I think about. I always tell people to offer to donate your time. A lot of people will take free work, and it gives you the opportunity to, you know, at a team, at a brand, any business really, to get in the mix and start to build relationships, and you position yourself for being hired full time by doing that. It's not about money at this point. It shouldn't be about money for an undergrad at this point.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? I unmuted you all.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, this is Brian. I guess I have a question. First of all, thank you for organizing this, and Zane for taking the time. It's great to see my pledge brother from 32 years ago talking about a life that I've followed closely. You know, Zane, one of the things that's always impressed me, and because I'm a risk-averse person, is all the different moves you've made and the changes that you've made throughout your career. You talked about them on the call here, but I guess I'm wondering sort of two things. One, you know, when you were making those changes, how did you get your mind around the risk of change, right? Making that job change, making a cross-country move twice. How did you get your mind around that? And then the second part is, you know, were there any risks you didn't take? And if so, why not?
That's a great question, Brian. Can I just, well, so, you know, when you're younger, you're agile. And, you know, as Andy and Brian and Matt and others on here who have kids and family know, it gets harder. It just gets harder as you get older. And so you have to be willing to make moves that position you for growth. And so lifestyle shouldn't be the priority at this point. You know, I don't know. I think I'm a relatively risk-averse person at times, but I had a sense that I needed to be agile and flexible, more flexible in the beginning than I would have. It was brutal moving away from my family. I'm super close to my family, moving to New York. Didn't know if I mean, gosh, you don't know when you'll come back, if you'll ever come back, if you'll develop roots there, get married there. And I know my parents were concerned about that, just being all the way across the country. But just had a sense that needed to kind of push my chips in early, in particular, and meet as many people as I possibly could, and position myself for kind of building up equity toward the future. And so, you know, now I sit with not a perfect resume. There's, you know, the second part of the question was, are there risks that you didn't take? Sure, for sure. There's always risks. I think it kind of leads me to the topic of failure. You have to, you know, get good at making mistakes. I have said this about the same guy who just asked me that question, Brian. Many times throughout my life, I've said this about Brian. This is the truth. I said, you know, Brian, my buddy Brian, is one of the smartest people I know. He's so smart. Put himself through school. Just super talented, super smart. Should be the kind of guy who acts like he knows a lot. But he's like twice as smart as I am. And I've told people this. He would always, and so I learned this from Brian. This is that iron sharpens iron kind of stuff in the fraternity. Is Brian was always one of those guys, as smart as he is, he he said to me so many times, just like he did right here. He said, hey, I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me? There's so much pride in business. We're all humans. We don't want to look stupid. You have to be measured in things, and you have to use emotional intelligence. That's an important thing. That said, the smartest people, the most successful people, Adam Silver, people like that, Brian, who's an attorney, it's a very successful attorney, Andy too, very successful. These are guys who aren't afraid to say, hey, I don't understand that. Can you please explain that to me? And they learn. And I can admit that there are times I've been in environments where I felt uncomfortable admitting that I didn't know something. And listen, you got to be measured about it. You don't want to stop board meetings to ask really remedial questions. That said, there's a time and a place to ask people. And the people I know, the Adam Silvers and, the late David Stern and these guys, they'd ask me questions just to understand it. And to Brian's question about risk, push chips in early, so much more flexibility and agility to just try things and fail and try more things and fail and be ready to move if you need to. And take on, don't be real picky with roles, don't have pride in the things that you do. By the way, that's just good leadership anyways, is to serve people, even the people that you lead. And then Brian, to Brian's point about being risk averse and taking risks, we all have an aversion to risk. But I think for me, I would say it's about learning to be comfortable failing. It doesn't have to mean failing in a business deal or a business. It doesn't mean just a colossal failure. It means being unafraid to use your voice. Business is about an exchange of ideas and about advocating for an idea. And so you have to learn to find your voice. In order to do that, you better learn to not be afraid to fail.
Great. Anybody else got a question? Hey,
Zane,
go ahead.
Zane, Rich.
Because you're going to say things that people are going to say wrong.
Do you ever bump into Hicks out there on the road? You guys kind of missed each other? Just as he was kind of leaving, you were coming, correct? Did you know each other in school?
Yeah, that's right. No, don't know Dan Hicks at all. We have some mutual friends, but cross paths. He wasn't broadcasting the sports that I was at the time.
Okay.
We should have connected by now, but haven't. There are great things about him.
Yeah.
He did a nice presentation a couple weeks ago too.
Do you have a copy of that?
I do. Yeah, we're going to the undergrads are working on getting a YouTube channel set up for us, and then we're going to start posting them on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So yeah, we will definitely share that. Hey, just real quickly, since I got everybody on, and by the way, just from a business perspective, Connor and Ryan, if you're in Tucson or Phoenix and you need a haircut, that guy right there, Jimmy V there, if you haven't been to his haircut place, you should consider it. And Jimmy, you might be one of the guys we asked to give a presentation about operating a franchise, haircut a franchise in COVID-19.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Hey, so just giving you guys all an update on U of A and what I know. So they're going to have a meeting in a couple weeks, but the speculation is in-person recruitment is not likely to happen. And we are going to be, the fraternities are all going to be doing their recruitment virtually or in smaller groups, or what us 1980s and 90s guys know, old school recruitment over the summer and just finding guys in the summer and meeting them at their houses and doing it the way we had to do it when we were in school. When they come back, they're likely to have heavy restrictions on what they would know as social activity. Now, SIGEP already has some of that because of national policies, but now we're talking campus-wide. They are going to convert Babcock dorm, which is nearest a hospital on Speedway, into the infirmary. Basically, if a student gets sick or you're the roommate and they're worried about you, they're going to send you over there on campus so you have a place to hang out until you're better. They're evaluating the dorms and the sizes in there. You know, they're going to do just like the restaurants, the safe spacing. It's a humongous impact on the financial structure because the university really operates as well as the restaurants around the campus operate on that auxiliary money. It's not just the tuition dollars, it's the parking and transportation and the food and the bookstore purchases. You know something that maybe none of you know, at U of A, the Greek community makes up about 13% of the students, but almost 35% of the births are purchasing on campus. So if you want to say what community is important to the future of the campus, it's the Greek community. Any other questions, anybody?
Hey, Matt, just as an aside, I know you guys all have an interest, but that loan that we got with the Bank of Tucson is it basically had a 10-year lifespan, but at 7 years, which we've already hit 7 years, they were redoing. And just FYI, we've been waiting on the bank, waiting for them to get through all the PPP loans, but they're in the throes of redoing our loan and with a brand new loan, a 15-year amortization with a call in 10 years. So it's kind of an interesting time, and they're asking a lot of questions. And the good news is that the house is they've got the 32 leases. I don't know what they do if somebody says, hey, I'm not coming back to school, but the good news is they're taking great care of the house. Doug Jones and those guys, the house looks awesome. I mean, it's in great shape. And so, they keep building. They're at 150 guys. So those are things you probably don't hear, but it's it's in good shape. The guys are doing well. Their grades are excellent. And, I think they were at 3.4, I think, this last semester. They've been at 3.4 and change for the last 6 years since they came back on campus. So they're doing great. There's a very good chance of the
wait. Did you just say 3.4? Z, Brian, was that what it was when we were there?
Yeah, I think that's a tick above where we were, Andy.
I was the scholarship chairman. I would have fallen off my chair if we had a 3.4.
Yeah,
I was a neophyte my first semester.
For 150 guys to be sitting at over a 3.4 is pretty remarkable, I think. And it's a little different. They're different cats. I mean, they're not. There's a couple of them on here, but they're. We're hell. I'm probably the oldest guy on the call, and it's a different deal. But I've got kids too, and they're not like me, which is really good for them. It's blessings for all of them. So anyway,
that's by the way, on the recruitment front. So all the clients I work with at U of A, we've built out Join SIGEP right on the banner of the website, and we've got recruitment forms and that, because U of A is going to send one email out to all the incoming freshmen and say, join these chapters. So the chapters that actually have a virtual presence, and chapters, honestly, like SIGEP, that have good grades, you're probably going to see the type of kid that's going to join a fraternity is going to be much more focused on basically career related, focused on academics. Yes, they're going to be social, but you know what? We're not going to be real social this next year. So they're going to have to be looking at the chapter for more reasons than one. Any other questions, anybody?
Zane, that was all.
If not, I appreciate you doing this, Zane, and we'll be back. And we're going to do these at least once a month. We'll pick a different subject, and at some point in the fall, we'll probably do a career panel so the undergrads can all participate, and then we'll pick a bunch of different careers.
Zane,
Matt, thank you. Thank you.
I just have one more question if possible. Just a quick one.
Yeah.
As someone who's going to be getting into hopefully either the sports or entertainment industry in the next 2 years, what are you looking for when hiring young kids who are coming out of college?
So it depends on what it is that you are interested in doing. Obviously, if you are aiming for something, just making this up, in finance or data and analytics, then you have to have a certain experience, right? Those are trades. The other jobs, and there's plenty of them in sports, sponsorship, PR, marketing, and so forth, don't require the same experience, because they're gonna, when you're just out of college, they don't expect you to have particular trade experience. They're looking for people who are self-confident, presentable, team player, willing to do anything. Social skills, great social skills. It's really the intangibles when you're just coming out of college, unless it's a really particular trade. Obviously, an attorney like Brian requires education and so forth. But you'd be surprised. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people and hired a lot of people, and quite frankly, Ryan, like, a lot of them they don't have self-confidence. They don't have good social skills, and they don't feel like they would do well in a collaborative team environment. So the intangibles are super important.
Brian, I little advice for you. I was fortunate enough to be Hicks's roommate. You probably know who Dan Hicks is. And a very close friend. And so I had a passenger seat when he was graduating and how he navigated up to his success. And it was fascinating. There was no job too small for Danny in the beginning, whether that be KT radio, doing little 5-minute bleed-ins, or doing KVOA Sunday sports for 5 minutes, or doing U of A women's basketball when there's 8 people in McHale at the time for a women's basketball game, and he's treating it like it's the NBA finals. So the guy was just uber prepared. He did his homework. Whatever came along, he took advantage of it, and he had a hunger and a passion to get to where he wanted to go. And I got to tell you, man, he had no clue it would lead to NBC Sports. Absolutely no clue. I almost fell out of my seat when he got a job at CNN, because I thought that was as big time as he was going to get, and he navigated up. The other thing that Danny did that was really smart is he got an excellent agent. And that people that are more versed than you on how to navigate through a maze, find those people, because they're invaluable. And it doesn't have to be in broadcasting. It can be in business. I had a mentor, a guy who ran a big savings and loan here in Phoenix when I was in college. And he took a shine to me because we participated in the same sport. I was a rodeo cowboy. And so you need those guys in your life. You need somebody to take you down a path to kind of, don't go there, go here. And they're hard to find, because most of the time they're just going to give you, just kind of cursory advice. I know your dad's well connected. Lean on him. The first job I got out of school, I was 23. I got a job with a guy by the name of Ernie Garcia. And Ernie's the richest guy in the state now. That was my first job. And my dad got it for me. But those are the breaks you need to get into something as hyper competitive as sports. Those are the people you need to go find and surround yourself with, because it'll make your journey that much easier. Then you got to work your ass off, because there's no substitute for working your ass off.
By the way, we get a lot of employers that come to me and say, okay, tell me what fraternity or sorority get it. They want to know the brand. So, you know, in a sense, SIGEP has a brand. You may be in Eller, Eller's got a really great brand. And then you're at the university, that's a good brand. Well, a fraternity that gets good grades and does service projects and has guys really active on campus, those are where the companies are going to. The one that we're reading about in the paper after the weekend incident, or the one with the lower grades, that's not where they're looking right now. They're looking for ones that are excelling. So, you know, keep doing those things at the chapter.
I appreciate the advice, guys. That's really helpful.
And I want to leave you with two super practical things. When you meet people and when you interview, smile a lot and ask questions. Good questions, not fake questions, but good questions, smart questions.
Great.
Always be learning.
Yeah, and don't say the word like every other word. It drives people in positions of approval crazy, man. Speak intelligently, present well, you get groomed, use the time to get groomed, and read. I mean, know the guy you're about to go meet. That information is completely available to your generation. It wasn't to ours, but know what the guy likes. The interviewer, you can get all kinds of information and make it interesting for him, because if he's just interviewing people all day long, it gets boring.
Absolutely.
What Jim said is absolutely right. Dovetails with the idea of doing the research, asking great questions. Sometimes you meet people and you can't do the research. You're meeting them on the spot, but ask them questions. That's a sign of a smart person and somebody who's sincerely interested. But don't take lightly the other one. Smile a lot. It sounds lightweight and fluffy, but I mean it. Most people don't. They're nervous. People hire people they like.
Yeah.
It is not a small deal. People hire people they like.
Absolutely.
Hey, Ryan.
Ryan, I agree with you, Zane. We hire optimists, and I can't stand being around pessimists. So if you have an optimistic attitude, I'm interested, because not every day is going to be great. But it's the winners that look for the next day to be better. Those are the guys who are going to make it. And it really does help to be, the glass is half full.
Good.
Ryan, how old are you, or what grade level are you in?
I'm going to be a junior next year.
Okay, so the other additional item amongst all the great things that the rest of the group shared here is look at the fraternity's regional director program. Because you will, if you have an opportunity to take that path for 1 year after graduation, you will also be connected with a lot of people at the national level that can assist with those future endeavors.
Great. Okay.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. Zane, really appreciate you doing that. And like I said, we'll keep doing these once a month. So just watch your email on your phone and you'll get another invite.
Matt, thank you for the opportunity. Love to do it. I'm available whenever. Everybody on this call has stuff to learn from. I can learn from everybody on here. So
great. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.